No region, race, or character is safe from the great arcane retcon, even the biggest enemy of all, the Void. And there are already 5 things that are basically guaranteed to be introduced over the next 2 years when the Void season finally arrives. Actually, it might be better to say that the next 3 years, because Riot always avoids going too deep into the Void, which will make more sense later on. But before that, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and consider becoming a member. You get access to a bunch of cool perks like choosing video topics or watching videos early.
We will consume you and become you.
Future Void reworks. With the advent of the new themed seasons Riot's been rolling out, we've been seeing a pretty clear pattern when it comes to reworks, with one new rework and one new champion releasing on a regular basis. First we had Mel and the rework for LeBlanc, Yunara, the rework for Xin Zhao, Zahen, and now the rework for Shyvana. We'll also be getting the new champion Locke pretty soon, and there's other more reworks that's currently being worked on, which should arrive between September and November, but we don't have much information about it yet. And yeah, this info is official, Medler himself posted it. Now when it comes time for the Void, I really think Riot could do something pretty interesting here. In this case, I think it would be a double rework, just like Kayle and Morgana, and it could be given to Kassadin and Malzahar. I'm saying this because their stories are deeply connected, with both of them being enemies since the very first version of Runeterra's lore. On top of that, both of them have pretty outdated models, with only minor adjustments acting more like a temporary band-aid, along with new splash arts. Besides that, their voice lines are completely outdated and don't match the current version of the story.
Silence!
We don't have any interactions between Kassadin and Kai'Sa, or Malzahar and Bel'Veth. Basically, none of them have interactions with any champions at all, and they probably have like 5 minutes of voice lines or even less. Now, if it's not a double rework, the biggest bet is that Kog'Maw would be the one to get picked. In fact, it's basically guaranteed, since he was already part of the rework voting options, alongside Nocturne, Skarner, Shyvana, and Tryndamere. That ballot started on January 7th, 2022, and each champion had a short explanation highlight what Riot would need to focus on when working their rework, and pay attention to what they said about Kog'Maw. Kog'Maw definitely hasn't aged well. His kit feels kinda all over the place, split between being a hyperscaling marksman and an artillery champion focused on ability power. He also feels out of place compared to his more sinister Void siblings, and even though we all love our cute little Void puppy, Riot wants him to feel a bit more Void-like. If Riot were to update Kog'Maw, they'd probably give him a full kit overhaul, while expanding his hyperscaling Protect the Puppy playstyle focused on himself. They try their best to keep the artillery ability power based part of his kit, but if necessary, they'd sacrifice it so his role as an attack damage shredder can really shine the way it should. Now, beyond the kit issues, Kog'Maw also has a problem with his visual identity that's been sparking a lot of debate. If you look at his early splash arts, whether it's the American or Chinese versions, you can clearly see he was designed to be a truly grotesque monster, something you could absolutely be disgusted by and terrified of getting caught and eaten by. Nowadays, I don't think the current version of Kog'Maw feels that disgusting or scary anymore. Just look at his current League PC splash art, and also his promo image in Wild Rift. That's because Riot leaned way more into the puppy side of him. But the thing is, they've been focusing more and more on just that, to the point where in his current mini lore, Kog'Maw isn't really described as evil or having malicious nature. He acts more like a curious baby that needs to eat or drool over things, dissolving them so he can actually understand them. And his curiosity is basically infinite, just like his feeding frenzy. Plus, Kog'Maw is never going to be satisfied because everything he eats gets dissolved almost instantly. But back then, Kog'Maw was way more cruel and didn't come off as this naive baby Riot is selling now. Just listen to his voice lines.
Food! Hunger never sleep. Smell soft flesh. Obey Void. Leave no scraps. Keep coming, not full. Terror coming. Daddy coming.
And one detail about his old voiceover is that, besides sounding way more imposing and unsettling in terms of effects, he had this line where he said terror, or the end, was near because Daddy was coming. And that line had 3 interpretations. The first one is that Kog was referring himself, calling himself Daddy, kinda saying, yeah, Daddy's online now, or something along those lines. The second theory is that Kog'Maw actually had a father, and that he would show up as a future champion. And this was confirmed back then by a rioter on the old community boards. which were basically like a Reddit for League players. But since the forums were shut down, there's no way to find the thread anymore. And even though the writer tried to look for it, they couldn't find any saved screenshots. Oh, and no, even though Cog has some similarities with the old Baron, that's not who this daddy was supposed to be. The third theory is that this daddy could be Malzahar, or the omniscient voice that merged with his psyche. Since in Kog'Maw's lore, it's said that he's following Malzahar's trail, and with this voice performing more and more summons, it kind of guides Cog along Malzahar's path, while also pushing him to interact with and adapt to the new environment he's in. And it leaves this big question hanging in the air. Who knows what's gonna happen when the Prophet and this endlessly hungry creature finally meet? This part, even though it comes from the old lore, I really hope Riot keeps it and expands on it, because it reminds me a lot of the green baby from part 6 of JoJo with Poochie. It would be insane to see Cog straight up eating Malzahar, and a new being or form being born from that fusion. Because nowadays, the omniscient voice that speaks and guides Malzahar is Bel'Veth. Malzahar serves her as her prophet, spreading her word, gathering followers, opening new rifts, and even offering sacrifices. And Bel'Veth can actually fully manifest her physical form after an entire port city was consumed by the rift Malzahar opened in her name so his empress could feed. This event happens in the short story Feast of the Prophet. On top of that, Bel'Veth herself has interactions with Kog'Maw, implying she has some kind of purpose for him, even mentioning a true form he's meant to reach.
Kog'Maw, so small and yet so much potential. Your true self awaits, mouth of the abyss.
So if we don't get some kind of new champion coming out of this JoJo reference between Malzahar and Cog, I honestly wouldn't rule out Riot adding some kind of mechanic to Kog'Maw's gameplay that lets him evolve. But obviously, it would need something to be very noticeable, unlike Kai'Sa's suit evolution in the game. I'd say this change would be even more over the top than Kha'Zix, who grows wings after you upgrade his E, and in his ultimate, he goes through a quick molting process, even getting a new coloration. But don't expect anything too insane, disgusting, or terrifying. Like I said before, Riot is currently focusing on making Kog'Maw cuter and goofier so he can fit into way more skin themes, because this formula has proven to be extremely profitable for the character, and this really started with the Pugmaw skin. To give you an idea, this skin was originally designed in a very different way. The first concept shows Kog'Maw wearing a dog's skin, basically like a costume, and in the second one, we see Kog'Maw as a pug, but obviously mutated with extra purple eyes and that creepy, disgusted tongue sticking out of his mouth. Honestly, the only thing weirder than that is that they even considered a toy baby Renekton concept, where he would wear a diaper, a bib, and use the egg he hatched from as a weapon. But getting back to Kog'Maw, they decided to go back to the version where he was basically a mutated void dog, and they even made examples with other dog breeds. But you can already see them removing certain elements, like the purple coloring of the extra eyes and the creepy tongue, making him more and more like a regular dog. And we already know how that turned out. And like I said before, it worked so well that every skin Kog'Maw got after Pugmaw always made him look like a cute puppy with big, innocent, curious eyes. Just look at his skins. And you can bet when he gets his rework, all the skins that still follow his old model are going to be updated to look like the ones you saw on the screen. So if you're expecting Cog to go back to getting more scary and more imposing skins like Deep Sea Kog'Maw and Jurassic Kog'Maw, or something as grotesque as the old splash arts I showed earlier, forget it, not happening. And honestly, thank God, because I'm totally on board with the cute puppy Kog'Maw, and Pugmaw is easily one of the best skins in the game. Some people might even say that Kog'Maw started getting infantized or softened up back with Monarch Kog'Maw, which a lot of people call Cog Queen, but nah, that skin is actually awesome and pretty funny, because it takes Cog's larva concept and evolves it. It's actually a really smart idea. But yeah, Kog'Maw is definitely missing the void aspect right now. Artist Augusto Oquirno even worked on a concept of what the new Kog'Maw could look like. And you can see he tried to take what Riot did with the character, that goofy, innocent puppy vibe, and added more void elements to make him look scarier when his W is active. But you can also tell from the splash art that the idea is still to keep that cute, goofy identity Riot chose for the character. And man, it's pretty much guaranteed that Riot's official Kog'Maw rework is gonna follow a path very close to this. Lore-wise, I already hinted earlier in the video about what could happen, especially with his connection to Malzahar, but I want to bring up an idea I mentioned in another video on the channel. Remember that Watcher hatchling concept that was considered during Nefuri's early development? Even if that means we'd lose the connection to Malzahar and that voice from the old lore, which honestly isn't even canon anymore, Kog'Maw could be relocated to the Freljord and turned into this Watcher hatchling that was created after a piece of one of the the Watchers got separated from its body and thrown away before being fully frozen by Lysandra. At least in my opinion, that would be a really good use of the character and would fit perfectly with the whole puppy theme, right? Is pushing for Kog'Maw. And honestly, the idea of a Watcher hatchling is super cool, so I don't want us to lose that to Nefira being a darkened dog. New minigame. Because of the heavy focus on developing League next, we won't be getting another minigame in 2026, and that's something Meddler already confirmed. And yeah, a lot of people actually liked Demacia Rising, even though it got some criticism because of the shield farming system that basically forced you to grind just to progress in the game. But now in 2027 and 2028, with League Next already up and running, we could definitely see new minigames in the upcoming seasons. But what would a Void minigame look like? The first idea that came to my mind was something like Swarm Mode we had back in 2024, which is still considered one of the best and most fun modes Riot have ever made. During the Void season, we could have a survival style mode where you keep upgrading yourself while defending a caravan, a city, or some kind of outpost against a waves of Void spawn. They just keep coming in massive numbers, with stronger and stronger variants spawning across the map until the final boss shows up. It would actually be really cool if Riot added the different types of Xerxai we see in Legends of Runeterra, since each one of them has their own role inside Rek'Sai's colony. But maybe expecting something on the level of Swarm for a minigame is asking for too much. However, the second idea is simpler and more realistic, but also kind of problematic. In this case, it would be a minigame inspired by The Visitor, which is a classic cult horror game from 2008 in a flash point and click style. In that game, players control a small crawling alien parasite that moves through a dark suburban environment, consuming creatures and humans to grow and gain new physical traits. It became known for its environmental puzzles and its pretty grotesque graphic violence. And honestly, there's no way Riot would ever make something like that, and I wouldn't even want them to, but the idea itself is actually really interesting and fits the theme. Another minigame I thought about was Feed Us, which is a series of flash action games released starting in 2011. In that one, players control a killer piranha that has to destroy boats, consume blood, and upgrade itself over time, basically trying to cause as much chaos as possible. And just like The Visitor, it became known for its heavy graphic violence, which was probably just to grab attention. That's something Tencent would never allow Riot to do, at least not without major changes for other servers, especially the Asian ones, which are the strictest when it comes to censorship. New champion. Now, both of the minigame ideas I mentioned would really only work if the new Void champion is a Voidborn. And we already know that's kind of a tricky situation for Riot, because monster champions tend to be less popular on the biggest servers, where the preference leans heavily towards more generic humanoid designs. So they'll probably have to fall back on something similar to what they did with Bel'Veth, basically creating a hybrid that sits somewhere between humanoid and monster. And yeah, Bel'Veth's concept is actually really cool, but that's because her whole identity revolves around being a new evolutionary path of the Void, something that consumed thousands of people and absorbed a vast ocean of knowledge and emotions. So honestly, I have no idea what kind of justification they're going to come up with for a new champion, especially since Bel'Veth already took the concept they originally had for Kai'Sa during her development, which was the idea of a new generation of Voidborn that would mimic humans. And even the Hive Herald, one of the newer Void creatures that serves Bel'Veth in spreading her coming, basically follows that same concept.
Speak to me! Tell me what you're doing!
Words are needed. Watch.
Enough! I'm taking you down!
I am not precious.
I can stop you. I must be able to.
Lies. Kai'Sa. Void.
Now, going a bit wild with these ideas here, it would be insane if Riot used something similar to Diego Brando's stand from part 7 of JoJo, Scary Monsters. Basically, the ability to infect other living beings and turn them into dinosaurs that he can control. So the idea would be something like this Voidborn applying some kind of effect to an enemy champion, and that effect would work kind of like a mix between Lulu's Polymorph and Renata's Glass Berserk buff, except you would actually get to choose what the transformed champion Void does. Like, the enemy champion turns into a Voidborn, and then you can force them to attack the nearest ally, dealing true damage, since most Voidborn, except Kha'Zix, has some kind of ability that deals true damage. Or you could make the infected champion attack their own wave, with the gold going to the champion who applied that effect, basically letting you steal your opponent's farm. The same thing would apply if the transformed target killed a jungle monster that grants buffs, like Blue, Red, Dragon, or Baron. Now, if it's not a Voidborn, then this champion could end up being touched by the Void. While in rare cases, beings from Runeterra aren't destroyed by the contact with the Void. Instead, they undergo an adaptation where they assimilate aspects of the Void while still maintaining a core of sense of identity. These adapted individuals emerge changed, both physically and mentally. Their abilities vary a lot depending on the nature of their exposure. These manifestations can include superhuman strength and speed, enhanced durability, heightened perception, energy projection, and even limited precognition. Most of those who survive this adaptation show visible signs of transformation. This can include unnatural mutations, physiological changes, or partial loss of cognitive function. They're no longer entirely of this world, but they're not completely lost to the Void either. The most notable examples of beings who went through this kind of transformation are Kai'Sa, Kassadin, and Malzahar, but thanks to Legends of Runeterra, we've had more characters joining that group. And honestly, Riot might even take the lazy route and just bring one of them instead of creating something completely new, while still hyping up people because a card from Legends of Runeterra became a champion. Anyway, on that list we've got Kareri the Returned, Void Blaster, and Belveth the Elder. Now, considering that the Void is the only region that doesn't have a champion specifically designed for the support role, it would be really cool if we got something like that. This new being could be artificially created or modified, becoming the first and only anti-Voidborn, and it could work kind of like anti-venom, where contact with symbiotes causes intense pain and slowly destroys them. It would be pretty sick if in terms of gameplay, you started off small but could absorb and destroy voidlings that spawn around the map, kind of like Bard's Chimes, stacking up power while also increasing your abilities in size over time. Now, it's pretty much guaranteed that we're gonna get comics as teasers, since Riot realized players are really enjoying this kind of storytelling format. They're even trying to improve the comic experience, since they've put out a survey asking for feedback, whether it's answering questions or giving suggestions. And on top of that, it's great for visibility, because YouTubers like me will make reaction, analysis, and breakdown videos. And no matter how it plays out, the new champion is probably going to be mentioned or show up in some way throughout these comics. But who would be the main characters of the Void season? I'd say Kai'Sa right away, but there's a problem with that, which I'll explain better in the next topic. And it might involve other champions like Kassadin and Malzahar, even though they're not as affected compared to Kai'Sa. Because of that, maybe Jax or Zillion could get more of a spotlight, since they're the only Acathian champions in the game, and Acathia's lore was explained mainly through Legends of Runeterra. Even Ezreal could show up if you think about it, since during some of his adventures in Shurima, he already ran into the Zershai and even got attacked by a swarm of voidlings in that tomb where the Tear of the Goddess was. He even had a note in his journal when he was near Acathia that said, "All it took was one look at the wasteland for me to think, yeah, this is way out of my league. For now." But all of these characters only really have a chance if the Void event takes place in Shurima or Acathia. If it happens in the Freljord, then Lysandra might finally get the spotlight she deserves. Included in the new retcon. Like I said, not even the Void is escaping the curse of Arcane becoming the main canon timeline. We know Riot basically rolled the timeline back about 5 years, and a lot of events haven't happened yet, and that's actually huge, because it can affect several characters tied to the Void as well. For example, Kai'Sa and her village, along with everyone she knew, were swallowed by that rift when she was 10 years old. That's also when she came in contact with the voidling that tried to eat her, but ended up getting itself killed instead, forcing it to bond its skin to her body just to survive. But it took about a decade of survival adaptation and evolution for Kai'Sa to reach the version we know today. So yeah, she's around 20 years old, and all of this comes from her official biography. Now, with the current retcon, what age range and point in timeline is she actually in? It's kind of hard to tell. You'd have to really go through the timeline to figure it out, but let's break it down. And just so you know, AN means after Noxus. Anyways, as you can see, in the year 984 AN, Kai'Sa received a dagger from her father, the same one she would later use to kill the voidling. In her biography, it said she got that gift when she turned 8. In 986 AN, that whole incident happens where Kai'Sa and her friends release goats that were meant to be sacrificed to the void, which ends up provoking it and causing the rift to open, swallowing her entire village. She was about 10 at the time. Then only in 996 AN do the events of the comic Breach and the short story The Girl Who Came Back take place. So at that point, Kaisa is 20 years old. But if you look into it, even though it's not fully detailed, the year when the Mage Rebellion happened was also around 996 AN. And from that, we can calculate something, because Lux during the events of Demacia Rising is 14 years old, and during her comic, which shows the Mage Rebellion, she's 19. If we're currently in the year 991, then Kaisa would be around 15 to 16 years old. Just count from 986 to 991. But here's where things get messy. In 991, Akali officially joined the Kinku Order to begin her training. But wait, in the comic The Truth, during the Ionia season, Kennen tells a Kinku acolyte that Grandmaster Shin is still far away, and neither he nor Mayan, Akali's mother, would arrive in time. And dude, either Mayan was still the Fist of Shadow because Akali wasn't old enough yet to join the Kinku Order and still start training to replace her, or Mayan had already gone back to being the Fist of Shadow after Akali abandoned the role. And I personally lean more towards the second option, mainly because of the interaction lines Yunara has with her and even with Shin.
To serve no one is to let your self-importance master you, Akali. Perhaps your wayward protege was right to call you a spineless coward.
So yeah, you can already see that even though we still have the old timeline we can use as a reference, the events are gonna be reshuffled and rearranged with new dates. There's definitely a chance that the Void season happens before Kaisa leaves her isolated life in the Great Side Desert, meaning we'd see a younger version of her. Or maybe by the time this event comes around, the timeline would have already moved forward, placing us closer to the most recent events around the year 997. And now you see what I mean when I say what they did with Arcane created this whole narrative curse, right? I'm not exaggerating. Either way, the Void has already been mentioned during the events of the current retcon, specifically in the comic The Warning, when visions of the fallen Jarvan IV shows up and starts going off on Xin Zhao, even questioning who he thinks he is to stand against the ascended warrior gods of Shurima, destroyers of the Void. It also is worth mentioning that Zahin himself has interactions with the Void, since he took part of the Void War for years alongside his brothers and sisters, trying to stop the advance of the Voidborn and to seal the rifts that kept appearing, especially the one in Acacia, which was the biggest and most dangerous of them all.
To fight the Void once more. This I will savor.
The return of the Curse of the Void. Way back then, when Riot didn't really give lore or anything like that to skins, some champions got skins connected to the Void. And here's the thing, when Riot started expanding the lore for these skin universes, this one actually got included too. The lore for this theme basically says, if the Scourge of the Void spreads across Runeterra, all will bow to its twisted evolution, invasive, hungry, and ravenous. The Void spares no creature and suffers no defeat. As for the champions who got these skins, we've got Fizz, who, by the way, is the only one who actually got some lore so far, which says, there is no doubt that Fizz is a deadly creature of the infinite void. But even in the void, Fizz is widely considered extremely annoying due to his love of bringing life into existence just to mess with the Watchers. Yeah, Fizz is even annoying them. And honestly, I think this skin might have come from a fan art that caught Riot's attention, and they just used that old summoner contract clause to take that concept and do their own thing with it. A lot of people liked the results, but some also thought it was kinda lame that they didn't keep the idea of his R summoning this massive Cho'Gath to devour the enemy. Moving on, we've got Voidbringer Alawi, which was her release skin, and it's pretty cool how the totem she carries turns into a head of a Voidborn that looks a lot like Alien Queen from the Xenomorphs. I can totally imagine that when they finally give this skin a proper lore, they'll say that even Nagak Boros, completely corrupted by the power of the Watchers, and instead of being the goddess of constant motion, she now brings everything to a halt through obliteration, with her faithful priestess spreading the new doctrine. And we also have Void Nocturne, and man, that skin is old. It's legacy content. It has no lore, and its design doesn't really match the Void aesthetic anymore. And it's definitely the skin that's gonna get completely reworked from scratch when Nocturne gets his rework. Now, the last one, but not the least, is pre-Void Kassadin, which is partially canon. And I say that because it reflects more of Kassadin's original lore, when he first witnessed the Void in the lost city of Acacia. When this skin gets updated with his rework, it'll probably stay canon, but showing Kassadin at the beginning of his quest for revenge against the Void, right after he equips himself with every arcane weapon and artifact he can find before setting off on this one-way journey. I honestly believe that Riot is going to revamp this entire theme and expand on it, so expect to see more corrupted champions and others who manage to adapt the Void even after being touched by it. The only question is whether Riot will actually allow them to become as monstrous as Kaisa. And yeah, that's basically it. I'll see you guys in the next video.